Back in 2017, The Surge offered a surprisingly solid sci-fi take on the action RPG Souls genre. Developer Deck 13 are back this year in an attempt to improve on those strong foundations of the original title. Whilst fans of the previous game will certainly still enjoy The Surge 2, this sequel sadly doesn't improve anywhere near as much as it should. The Surge 2 takes place after the events of the original game. This time around you play as a player-created protagonist as opposed to Warren from the original. The character creator, whilst basic, features numerous options for customising the appearance of your character. Set in a dystopian depiction of Earth, you're an escaped convict who finds themselves trying to piece together their memory in the dangerous streets of Jericho City. Whilst the game's setting features more variety than the original, the majority of those maze-like areas unfortunately remain a little grey and drab. From the post-apocalyptic streets to bleak sewers, glamorous locales in The Surge 2 are few and far between. Thankfully, some of the game's locations do pick up somewhat in the latter half, particularly the game's forest zone, but it's a shame that more variety wasn't spread throughout. The Surge 2's combat picks up where the original left off. It's a fairly gratifying take on the Souls-like genre. Body part targeting makes an excellent return, allowing players to target different areas of enemies based on which body parts are weaker or more armoured than others. Just like the Souls game, stamina plays a huge role, with each hefty attack swinging in deliberate fashion. Players can dismember specific body parts from enemies after attacking them enough, which in turn provides a chance that the enemy will drop what they're wielding, whether that's targeting a specific arm holding a weapon that you're interested in, or a piece of head armour. It was one of the standout areas of the Surge 1's combat, and it remains so here. The allure of gaining new items strikes an interesting balance between playing greedy or playing smart. Developer Deck 13 tried to spice things up a little this time around, adding a directional block and parry mechanic into the game's combat mix. Despite trying to get a hang of it time and time again, I found this mechanic to instead be utterly infuriating. There's numerous bosses and enemies in the game which seem designed around parrying, however, the mechanic's just not refined enough to justify it. An essential mod allows you to see the direction of an enemy's attack, however each enemy will attack at varying speeds which are designed to throw you off. The timing window of this parry is just way too small and inconsistent, and it leads to incredible frustration instead. What doesn't help matters is that the game punishes you significantly for a failed parry, either through a stamina depleting half block or just simply not blocking the attack at all. I bashed my head against this combat wall attempting to learn the timing window, and instead just came away with the decision that dodging and avoiding attacks was a way more reliable way of mitigating damage instead. It's a real disappointment. Thankfully, that combat itself is still fairly satisfying. The slow motion dismember finishes never got old for me, and when everything's going your way, the combat can feel like a blast. There's a much greater weapon variety here too, with plenty of tools at your disposal, from slower, heavier two-handed objects to wide-reaching staffs and dual-wielding blades. As you achieve successful hits, your battery gauge fills. Filling up the charges on the bar allows you to either spend these on instant heals or store a limited number of them for use later. It's the system that actually encourages aggressive play, given that your energy depletes over time, and it's one that I found to be a pretty smart way to handle healing. Another smart addition is that upon death, you'll now leave behind a regenerative healing beacon of scrap. In standard Souls-like fashion, if you're killed, you'll drop any held scrap, that's your experience points basically, at the area that you died. However, this time around, that scrap now gives off a convenient healing aura. It provides a slight helping hand for tackling tough fights a second time around, which I really appreciated. Or third time around, fourth time around, fifth time around, you get the point. The handy drone is a new addition to the Surge 2, and it provides the player with a form of ranged attack. The drone can be upgraded with various weapons and tools throughout the game, including the ability to drop automated turrets, mines, stun, or simply shoot enemies from afar. and whilst I did find it to come in handy plenty of times, the drone feels like more of a power-up than a reliable weapon due to its limited ammunition. Said ammunition also doesn't return upon death, so after narrowly scraping through a tough fight, only to fall to a cheap death minutes later, means that you're going to be without help of your drone companion when you approach that tough combat scenario a second time around. It's a situation that I actually found myself in way too often. It's a scenario that is at times exacerbated by numerous irritating enemies that seemingly have infinite ranged ammunition to just chip at you away from afar. Said irritating enemies are something that I encountered far too often for my liking in the Surge 2. There's just way too many frustratingly designed combat scenarios which really dampen my enjoyment of the game. The game's combat is at its best when you're fighting a single enemy, just simply by design. However, there's plenty, and I mean plenty of moments where the developers throw 3 or 4 enemies at you at one time, which lead to tons of infuriatingly cheap feeling deaths from fights where I felt like I was battling the game's mechanics more than the AI itself. It's these constant difficulty spikes which just end up feeling downright annoying rather than satisfying. Game's progression doesn't help this situation much either. You can spend your scrap at medbays, the game's version of save points, throughout the game world to level up. After doing so, all the enemies respawn just like in Dark Souls. After leveling up, you gain a couple of points to distribute into health, stamina or your battery power, and whilst I did notice the difference in the slow crawl of improved stats, the game's enemies pretty much felt like they were just scaling up one to one with me. New armour pieces offer numerous bonuses which look appealing on paper, but they rarely result in a tangible benefit outside of some set bonuses here and there. As a result, you rarely feel powerful unless you return to old areas. Enemies hit harder at the same rate that you're improving your health and gear. It's like a never-ending statistical stalemate. I did, however, appreciate the myriad of options provided by the game, from the ability to disable motion blur and chromatic aberration, to altering controls, adjusting how often you see the game's slow motion finishes, and even the ability to select from a higher resolution 30fps mode versus a higher frame rate lower 1080p resolution mode on the enhanced consoles. There's other smart new changes too, such as the ability to converse with various NPCs throughout the world, not just providing more context to the game's lore, but you'll also encounter a range of vendors and quest givers along your journey. Sadly, there's no easy map system to view or track the quest areas of interest to help you navigate the game's maze-like environments. Instead, dotted around the environment are viewable maps within the game world, often leading to more confusion than they actually aid. Despite numerous improvements from its predecessor, sadly there's numerous areas of the game which oddly enough feel like a step backwards from the original. So much so in fact that I actually ended up firing up the original game to check that my mind wasn't playing tricks on me. I started a fresh new game on the Surge 1 and I was actually blown away by how visually, at least on the Xbox One X from testing the game, that the original felt like a step up over the second game. The lighting is notably superior when placed side by side with the sequel's flat appearance. Not only that, but the original title has far more personality and character to it, when compared to the Surge 2's distinct lack of any strong characters and a barely existent story. I even felt that during combat the original had more weight and impact to my attacks than the second. What originally just started out as a thought of my memories playing tricks on me ended up blowing me away how striking the difference was. It doesn't help matters too that I encountered a range of bugs during my extensive time with the game, from minor visual quirks such as NPC characters' hairlines seemingly wobbling constantly. Seriously, what's going on here? Regular frame rate drops, screen tearing, but some more frustrating issues which resulted in unnecessary deaths such as grav lifts not functioning and instead just allowing my character to fall to their death. At one point during the game, after I died, my character still seemed to exist in an invisible form. During this form I was still able to attack enemies who struggled to hit me. This major bug actually seemed like a gift from the gaming gods after an extensive period of struggling with this seriously tough boss. Given the timing of the issue only a few corridors away from said boss, I actually thought, why don't I wander into the boss's combat arena and battle it using my newfound invulnerable form and see what happens. I ended up slaying the boss and my character was unable to open the doors necessary to leave the area, but thankfully the game had still saved my progress regardless. Boss successfully defeated, finally. Despite a fairly extensive list of issues with the game, The Surge 2 is still a decent attempt at the Souls-like formula. Big fans of the original will undoubtedly appreciate the numerous advancements and improvements to variety. The original felt like a breath of fresh air at the time of release. It was a surprisingly strong game. The Surge 2, however, feels like a game with a grander scope, stretched across a budget that was just unfortunately too thin to support it. The result is an inconsistent experience that goes from feeling great one moment to infuriating at the drop of a hat. If you loved The Surge 1, it's likely you'll feel just as strongly about the sequel. Go and buy it and enjoy it. The combat's still good fun and the improvements to weapon and environmental variety are sure to please many. If, like me though, you were hoping for more of a step up over the original, you'll likely leave feeling a little disappointed. The Surge 2 has far too many frustrating mechanics, difficulty spikes and niggling issues which just slowly begin to add up over time. Developers Deck 13 are onto something here, but this simply doesn't feel like they're there yet. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit that bell button for notifications when we upload further videos. It really helps the channel a lot.